You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk with Chris Ward, and it's time for another preview podcast, Steelers versus Jaguars. And Chris, a little bit of award talk. Ben Roethlisberger was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Week, and he was nominated for the FedEx Air Player of the Week. And finally, Ben's getting a little bit of that national love that we believe that he all deserves for his start this season.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance by Roethlisberger against the Bengals on Sunday. He threw for 333 yards, which was, the most on the season for him. And then he threw 4 touchdown passes, which was also a season high. So, for the AFC, who put up better, there wasn't any other player that really came close to Roethlisberger this week when you really look at it.
If you want to know something interesting about Ben Roethlisberger, he has never received an MVP vote in his entire career. And again, you could talk about his personal life, and a lot of people hold that against him, but he's certainly going to be getting some sort of award this year. At the very least, he's getting MVP votes, and I know that Alex Smith is the sentimental favorite for Comeback Player of the Year, but Washington haven't particularly done well, and yes, I know that his injuries were life-threatening. I think you have to look at it in terms of impact on team and what they've done.
Yeah, Smith has an incredible story, and, I wouldn't really have an issue if he won Comeback Player of the Year because, definitely he had like 17 surgeries and, they almost amputated his leg. So, it's incredible that he's even still playing. He came back and, decided he still wanted to play football, much respect to him for that. But yeah, I think Roethlisberger, is definitely in the running for league MVP. I think, depending on which betting site you go on, like I seen top 5, and I think another one I saw, he was 7th. So, there's some guys above him, like Mahomes right now he has a 27-1 touchdown interception ratio, and, he's playing great too. So it's going to be tough, but I think he's definitely in the running for it.
Well, fingers crossed for Ben with either of those awards, and of course there's other awards like the FedEx Air Player of the Year that I think that he's certainly walking away with something national. We're going to find out in the coming weeks what that is. And another thing I want to talk about is the interesting words that Mike Tomlin had about MAC schools in a press conference. Chris, he made fun of MAC schools when he has a quarterback that went to a MAC college. Well, we're going to have to get some words from our friend Guthrie Rasmussen, who goes to Bowling Green.
Tomlin likes to have his, he has sayings for things. And he said that we're not a Big Ten team playing a MAC opponent this week in regards to when asking about the Steelers-Jaguars game potentially being a trap game.
It's always fun with the banter. Ben shot back with a little quip about William and Mary. So yeah. It's all in good fun, people.
Yeah, Ben, he was asked about it today in his Zoom interview with the media, and he said, I haven't had a chance to get him yet. He mentioned it again in the team meeting, too, and I wasn't too happy about that. I have to figure out what conference William Mary is in. We will say something about it.
For the listening public, Mike Tomlin's William and Mary tribe are in the Colonial Athletic Association, so make sure Ben knows that, because I'm interested to hear the quip, the banter that he has when he tells Tomlin about CAA teams. For the listening public, Mike Tomlin's William and Mary tribe plays in the Colonial Athletic Association. So be sure to tweet that at Big Ben, or, last week you mentioned the betting information for the Steelers and Bengals. What's the line this week for the Steelers and Jaguars?
Yeah, the Steelers are currently listed as 10-point favorites against the Jaguars on Sunday, and the over-under is 47.5 points, according to oddsharks.com. Pittsburgh is 5-0 against the spread in its last 5 early afternoon games, and the total has gone under in 14 of the Steelers' last 18 games on the road. Jacksonville is 0-8 straight up in its last 8 games, and the Steelers are 23-5 straight up when they are 10-point favorites or more under Mike Tomlin, according to Pro Football Reference.
Place your bets, Steelers fans. And now we're about to get into our interview with our guest for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And really, this is kind of a sentimental game for me in a way. My first in-person game as a Steelers fan in Heinz Field was that Jacksonville Steelers game in 2017 when Leonard Fournette ran wild on the Steelers. And
that was the regular season one, right?
Yeah, that was the regular season one.
Yeah.
Not the shootout. Is that I have a family member in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. Coincidentally found out about it a little bit before I went to that game. And so there's always a rooting interest for the Jaguars. And I've always appreciated their history, coming into the league as an expansion team and making it to the AFC Championship in their second year of existence. But Chris, what are your thoughts on the Jaguars?
I think, they've been playing really tough this year, even though they're a one-win team. You saw they only lost by 4 points against the Packers last week, 24-20. And, they're in position to, possibly, win the game, but they took a couple sacks and, that was it for them. I don't know. They're a scrappy bunch. I think, the Steelers, they just have to come in and play their A game and don't let up. And hopefully they play like they played against the Bengals last week and don't have another occurrence where, like the Cowboys game, where they came out really lethargic and got down and had to come back late in the game to beat Dallas.
Well, this has been the game that's been designated as the trap game for the Steelers, especially after their narrow victory against the Cowboys. And now let's talk more about these Jacksonville Jaguars with our next guest. We're glad to have on John Shipley, beat reporter for Jaguar Report on the SI Team Network. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to do it with you.
Jacksonville has been dubbed by most Steeler fans as the trap game as they look to go 10-0 on the season. They are the last team the Steelers have faced in the playoffs in that shootout in the 2017 AFC Divisional, with Jacksonville winning that game and advancing on to the AFC Championship. Now it's clearly a different time. Jacksonville was 1-8 with a ton of turnover since that game, but 5 of their losses this season have been by 10 points or less. John, give us a reason why we should call that a trap game.
Well, I think a part of it, honestly, is a lot of people, both Steelers fans nationally and in Jacksonville, are thinking of it as type of a trap game because of, you just said, that 2017 season. The Jaguars beat the Steelers twice that year. And then even in 2018, when the Steelers beat them in Jacksonville, it took a ferocious comeback in the fourth quarter for Pittsburgh to get over what was a not very good Jaguars team. So I think people are looking at it like that. But I think, personally, I don't think that's a good way to look at it just because how much turnover both teams have had since, especially the Jaguars. When I think of their 2018 game, I think of Jalen Ramsey versus Antonio Brown. And now, neither one of those guys are going to be on the field. Now, in terms of Jacksonville this year, I think the reason it could be somewhat of a trap game is just because the Jaguars, they play – this is a bit of a cliche, I know, but they're the youngest team in the NFL, and they often play like it. They shoot themselves in the foot. They make young mistakes, but they play hard. It doesn't matter what the score is. They give full effort for 4 quarters, and I think because of that, the ball bounces their way sometimes, and if you overlook them, I think they have a chance to surprise you, just like they surprised the Packers last week.
And John, Minshew mania was running wild there in Jacksonville last year, and he began the season as a starter, and he's injured the last couple of weeks. But the Jaguars won that week 1 matchup against the Colts. They're currently on an 8-game losing streak. How is Jake Luton? Has he filled in pretty well for him in the last couple of weeks? And what has Jacksonville done to stay competitive with their 6th-round draft pick?
Well, I think against the Texans in Week 9, I thought Luton was moderately impressive. His 73-yard touchdown to DJ Chark on the 3rd offensive play of the game, I'm not sure that's a throw Minshew has hit this season or even last season. So he definitely had his moments. If he makes his 2-point conversion throw to DJ Chark, they tie that game and go into overtime. But then you look at him last week against the Packers, and I know you have to factor in the win to an extent because they were like 30-mile-per-hour winds, but he was just as he was even more inaccurate last week than he was in Week 9, a game he was pretty inaccurate in his NFL debut. So I think when you just look at last week, offensively they scored 13 points against a really bad Packers defense. It's kind of hard to be optimistic about the Jaguars' offense right now. If the Jaguars' offense is kind of staying afloat, I think it's because of the play of James Robinson, DJ Chark, and Keelan Cole. Those are the three guys kind of pushing it right now. So I'd say Luton's been impressive for a 6th-round rookie. But if you're just forgetting where these guys are drafted and just looking at the quality of him as an NFL quarterback, I don't think you're getting winning football.
Well, what is Jacksonville's plans at quarterback once Minshew is ready to return? Is it a foregone conclusion that they're going to draft one of Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields?
Well, if there's anything I've learned in my about 14 months of covering the Jaguars, it's that nothing should be a foregone conclusion. The move that seems the most logical, most sensible, it doesn't always happen. I think nearly all people would say if you're in the Jaguars position or you're currently in the driver's seat for the number 2 overall pick, you have to take a quarterback. And I think the Jaguars would seriously consider that. And I think it's likely they would do that because they know that, quarterback's the biggest thing that they're missing right now. And Minshew wasn't even playing all that great before he got hurt to begin with. But I do think you have to factor in who's making the decisions. The Jaguars, they said coming into the year, it's a must-win year for head coach Doug Marrone and general manager Dave Caldwell. But Dave Caldwell's in, I believe it's his 8th season as general manager, and they've only had one winning season. So he has survived for this long. So I'm just going to kind of wait and see until they actually make a move to replace him to really think about who's going to be looking for that quarterback.
With the departure of Leonard Fournette, and they've gotten an unexpected production from undrafted rookie running back James Robinson, who's 5th in rushing with 689 yards on the season. He posted his 3rd 100-yard game league against Green Bay, and he's rushed for at least 99 yards in his last 3 games. He had 7 touchdowns this year, which was tied for the most among all rookies until Chase Claypool had 2 touchdown receptions against the Bengals on Sunday, bringing his total to 9. But back to Robinson, remarkable story, coming out of Illinois State. I think Robinson can attack the Steelers' run defense.
Yeah, no, he is a remarkable story. I was on a conference call with Mike Tomlin earlier today. Each week the opposing team's head coach has to talk to the opposing team's media, and I asked him about James Robinson, and he said, if you love football, then you love stories like his. And that just resonated with me because I think that's really how most people see it. I think Robinson, he's a running back who can hurt you in a lot of ways. He obviously doesn't have the speed of maybe some of your top tier running backs like say Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. So he's not going to kill you on the edge, but he has enough speed to beat you to the edge. He has plenty of power. He breaks a lot of tackles. He has remarkable vision. I think the biggest difference between him and Leonard Fournette is that Robinson just has much better vision and much better instincts for the position. And he catches the ball well also. His pass protection is still hit or miss at times, but he has shown good hands and ability to break tackles after the catch. So he's a running back who he's going to hurt you in a lot of ways. Maybe he won't break off that, 90-yard touchdown or anything like that, or anything like Fournette did in 2017, but he can still hurt you.
That's high praise for a guy that in Fournette that I watched personally in the stadium make those big runs. Wow, it's just interesting with this guy. Thing with Jacksonville's rushing attack, he's the only rusher with over 100 attempts. And a trend that I noticed with the Steelers over the past couple weeks, really since Baltimore, is that when teams have multiple rushers in an attack, they tend to have a little bit of trouble. Baltimore with the 265, Dallas had 144, and Cincinnati last week used 4 rushers for 139 yards total. What was the story with Robinson? Was he expected to take the job, or was there another guy that was going to be at running back for Jacksonville?
I think when the Jaguars released Fournette, I think their idea was that Robinson would be the starter. I'm not sure they saw him. I believe if you're just counting running backs, like you don't count Minshew's scrambles or you don't count Laviska Shenault's handoffs. I think if you just count running backs, I think Robinson has all but 7 of the Jaguars carries this year. So I don't think anybody, especially the Jaguars, predicted that. But I do think he was set to be the guy with Fournette gone. With that said, there's a couple running backs the Jaguars, we're maybe hoping to see that they haven't. Raquel Armstead, he's been on the COVID list since September 3rd. There hasn't really been much updates about that. And then Devino Zigbo. Devino Zigbo was a super impressive player with the Saints in the preseason last year as a rookie. The Jaguars were big fans of him. I've had several people inside the organization tell me just how highly they thought of him coming into the year. And I thought he was one of the stars of their training camp, but he had a hamstring injury right before the first game. And as a result, he's only played in one game so far, but he should be playing this Sunday, be making his return, and we'll see if he gets any carries.
And John, the Jacksonville, they have a pretty promising receiving core. It's a really young group, and it also have Tyler Eifert, who was with Cincinnati for a number of years at tight end. Who could cause the most trouble for the Steelers in the receiving game?
I think DJ Chark and Keelan Cole. For as good of a veteran leader as he is, he hasn't added much to the passing game this year. Laviska Shenault is a big weapon, but it's up in the air if he'll even be available on Sunday. So I think DJ Chark and Keelan Cole, they're two really talented receivers because they've both shown that they can win at all three levels of the field. You can throw them short passes and they'll get yards after catch. They can win in the middle of the field. They can beat you deep. So they've shown, and Jaguars have shown that they'll use either one of them in each of those roles. So they're a decent, solidly duo that can give Steelers trouble and give any real secondary trouble.
And Cole had that big punt return for a touchdown last week. So that's something the Steelers will definitely have to look out on special teams. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Cole's a really talented player. People probably remember him for his one-handed catch against the Patriots a couple of years ago, but he had been mostly up and down until this year was his first year as a starter, and he's kind of really taken off despite the bad passing game around him.
Well, the big question that the Steelers bring to every team is how are they going to stop this pass rush? And the Steelers, who lead the league in sacks with 36, the Jaguars have allowed 28 total sacks this year, which is sixth most in the league. What have been the problems with their offensive line? Is it injuries or something else?
I think when you're looking at just sack totals, you have to consider a few different things. I think a big part of it is Gardner Minshew isn't a player who does well with pressure because of his ability to scramble. A lot of times, if his first or second read isn't there, he'll leave the pocket. And as a result, he got himself sacked more than a few times. And then Jake Luton, I'd say probably about half of Luton's sacks so far have actually been on him, just dropping his eyes and dropping the ball and not looking downfield. But then on the other hand, the Jaguars, they haven't seen the play that they wanted out of right tackle Jawan Taylor this season. He had a great rookie year, but he has struggled this year. And then left tackle Cam Robinson started off really strong, but he's kind of tapered off the last couple of weeks. So it's a mix of the quarterbacks having issues and the offensive tackles not being as good as they need to be.
And switching to the defensive side of the ball, only 5 teams have fewer than the Jaguars, 9 takeaways. And up front, Jaguars are struggling to get after the quarterback with just 9 sacks, which ranks dead last in the league. The Steelers' offensive line has allowed just 10 sacks this season, which is the second fewest in the league. And they haven't given up a sack in the last 2 games. What has been the issue with the pass rush and just overall the defense with the Jaguars and not being able to get takeaways? They did have 3 last week against Green Bay, however.
Yeah, no, I think the big issue is, I think they're a good example of just how important a secondary is for a pass rush because, they just at times this season they've started several rookies in the secondary. It's kind of been a mishmash unit kind of just thrown together. And I think when you lose guys like Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye in the same year, and as a result, you have to start some rookies that you're not going to be able to get after a quarterback because they are able to get the ball out of their hands quickly. So I think that's really been the biggest thing is that the secondary has struggled. But on the other hand, they've also missed Yannick Ngakoue and Calais Campbell a good bit. Josh Allen, he's still been disruptive, but he hasn't had the help of those 2 pass rushers. So his numbers have gone down a bit as a result.
Well, moving on to yards allowed by the Jaguars this year, they're 29th in pass defense, and they allow an average of 283.9 yards and are 25th against the run, allowing 131.7 yards and an average of 4.4 per carry. In total, that's 415.6 yards per game. Second worst in the league, only ahead of Seattle. What has been the main problem with the defense? I know you mentioned the talent lost up front, and now they're thriving in Baltimore. Is it just young guys that don't have the experience?
It's a mix of things. They have the youngest defense in the NFL by a good bit. So it's definitely a lot of inexperience and the fact that they lost some talented guys. But I think a big part of it's also that they're running a scheme that just it does not work unless you have a really good talent on all three levels of the defense. Their scheme looks great in 2017 because they had Pro Bowlers on the line at linebacker and in the secondary. They're running the same scheme now they did then, but they don't have any of the Pro Bowlers like they did a few years ago. And you've just seen over the last 3 years, as the defense gets less talented, it struggles more. So I think a big part of it's experience, but a bigger part of it's the scheme.
Yeah, and the Jaguars, they run that 4-3, which was huge when they had Campbell and Ngakoue, and of course even Allen last year was a promising rookie. It's a shame to see what's happened to Jacksonville.
Yeah, no, they've definitely fallen quick, and they've tried a lot of different things other than changing a defensive coordinator. That's pretty much the one thing they haven't tried to change.
And at linebacker, they seem to have a pretty solid players there with Miles Jack, who is one of the very few holdovers from that 2017 team that beat the Steelers AFC Championship game. I think it's only like 4 starters currently from that team right now. Joe Schobert at middle linebacker, who came in free agency from Cleveland, is a really solid. We've seen him give the Steelers troubles over the years in the AFC North. How's the overall linebacker unit look this season?
When Miles Jack has been healthy, I'd go to say he's been the best linebacker in the NFL this year in the games he's been healthy in. I think a lot of people maybe haven't given him that due because the Jaguars have been so bad on defense, but he's kind of been a one-man wrecking crew. And then on the other end, Joe Schobert, he's had some pretty major struggles at times this season. There's been games where he's been credited for 5 missed tackles. There's been games where he's given up 2 touchdown catches, and even on Thursday Night Football, he got shook on a 3rd down scramble by Ryan Fitzpatrick. So, at times, I think the Jaguars haven't gotten the play that they were hoping from him, but he is coming off what I thought was his best game of the season against the Green Bay Packers, and he has a lot of talent. So I'd agree with you. When you put those two together, and when they're on their A game, they're a really talented duo.
No more Bouye and Ramsey, but they have rookie cornerback C.J. Henderson and Sidney Jones, who had a good game against Green Bay on Sunday. And at safety, they have Daniel Thomas and Gerard Wilson. What has been the biggest issue with the secondary in allowing so many passing yards? It's hard to pinpoint the biggest issue because there's been so many issues. They've had plays where they've missed tackles, and as a result, they've given up big yards after catch. They've had plays where they missed an assignment. C.J. Henderson gave up a big touchdown against the Texans. It's just a lot of little things that have stacked up, and I think when you have a really young secondary like that, that's basically a bunch of rookies and then Jared Wilson, I think that's what you're going to see, just them make those kind of youthful mistakes. And I think as they get more experience, those mistakes will go away. But right now, the Jags are kind of going through the growing pains.
So, John, what is your biggest concern for the Jaguars in this game? And who do you think will have a big performance for Jacksonville?
I'd definitely say Pittsburgh's defensive line has to be your biggest concern because there's not much of me that thinks Jacksonville doesn't go down by a couple scores to at least start the game. And once that happens and Pittsburgh can pin their ears back, I think that's when Jacksonville could really falter. So I think just Pittsburgh's overall pass rushing unit, especially TJ Watt, that's a big mismatch against Jawan Taylor. As for who I think can play well, I think Joe Schobert and James Robinson are 2 guys to watch. Schobert, like you have said, has always played well against the Steelers, and he's coming off his best game. Meanwhile, James Robinson's coming off another really good game, and there's no real reason to think the Jaguars won't continue to defeat him.
Do you have a prediction for the game?
Yeah, I'll go 34-20 Steelers.
Well, you mentioned it's been 14 months since you started covering the Jaguars for SI. And, of course, we've been talking about the change with the entire Jaguar squad from that playoff team. How has the changes been for you with COVID?
No, it's been a lot different. There's no real 2 ways about it. That covering a team during COVID, during a pandemic, is how much different it is than last year. Last year we got to be in the locker room with the guys. You can talk one-on-one with players, stuff like that. all press conferences were in person, and just stuff like that. But COVID, obviously kind of threw a wrench in things. But I think the Jaguars have done a fantastic job of instilling really good safety protocols for media to allow us to cover the team. So while it's been different, the Jaguars have been great in making sure that, hey, it's different, but it's still definitely doable.
And John, I saw you tweeted out a Tomlin quote about how the Steelers Jaguars, past, kind of rivalry, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, doesn't really impact Sunday. I thought that was a really interesting quote there.
Yeah, no, that was we like I said earlier, we do those kind of conferences with the opposing coach each week, and I think that's my favorite thing that a coach has said this year. And I'm a huge Mike Tomlin guy to begin with. I'm a huge Mike Tomlin fan, so when he said that was just like, okay, that's perfect.
And just give our viewers what Tomlin said, what John tweeted out. He said, this is what Tomlin said. He said, we're not playing Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardle, and they aren't playing Hines Ward or Jerome Bettis. So, it's a much different, type of game, compared back to in the early 2000s where the Steelers and Jaguars just always had tough games, played the Steelers tough. Even, the Steelers have won 3 straight times in Jacksonville, but they won by a combined 17 points in those games.
Yeah. I mean, even, like in 2018, I don't remember what the exact score was, but the Steelers needed to score multiple times in the fourth quarter, and it really took the Jaguars squandering that lead. So the Jaguars, especially under Doug Marrone, they played the Steelers tough, but this is a much different team.
How Jaguars fans been feeling about the organization? They're 1-8 right now, and how's the fan base feeling overall about their future?
Well, they're at the stage now where you can tell they'll be pretty upset if they actually win a game. So I think that kind of tells you where things are. I think Jags fans understand that they could potentially have a very bright future just because of the amount of draft picks and the amount of cap space they're set to have, and they can potentially get a franchise quarterback. So I think they see the potential, but I also think they're hesitant to fully buy in just because they've seen that potential wasted before.
And I'm just curious because I'll give you a little bit of backstory about me. One of my family members, Dewan Polk, runs the pro scouting department, I believe, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And just hearing about how the GM has been around for a while, it's making me hopeful that there's not going to be much changeover in that situation because I've never met him before, but man, I'd really like to meet him and just pick his brain about that stuff. So please tell me that there's not going to be any big personnel changes.
I'll tell you, but I'm not going to make a prediction. I, like I said earlier, I've learned to just roll with the punches when it comes to the Jaguars. Don't be surprised by anything and just kind of deal with the news as it comes.
The Polk family needs to be employed, and I need to meet this man because I'm trying to latch on a little bit there. And that's John Shipley, beat reporter for Jaguar Report on the SI Team Network. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
And that was John Shipley, beat reporter for Jaguar Report on the SI Team Network. Chris, it's time for our favorite part of the preview podcast. It's predictions, and last week we didn't exactly do well, but the Steelers won. We covered the spread. We said 30-20. The score was 36-10.
Yeah, I mean, Steelers, they played a really good game last week, and blew them out. The Steelers played a really good game last week, and blew the Bengals out. By 26 points, winning 36-10. They started off a little bit slow, but it was pretty much Steelers from the get go. Really, they just completely dominated them in every facet of the game.
And as we mentioned in our interview and to begin this podcast, it's viewed as a trap game for a reason. Jacksonville is probably one of the more interesting 1-8 teams. They were interesting to begin with Minshew, and he's not in the lineup, of course, but still, the fact that they've been able to keep it close, it can definitely make any Steeler fan, and that's what we are, and that's what a lot of people are, nervous about this game. So first, let's hear your score predictions. What do you got, Chris?
I'm probably going to go with that same mark about they're on the road this week, so I'm probably going to go probably about 10 points again. I'll say 27-17. The Steelers win.
If there's one thing that the Steelers really need this week is a shut-up game for the entire league, because a lot of fans have been saying that they're not a legit 9-0 team. They're going to lose. It's not a real 9-0 team. So I think the Steelers are going to probably go out here and make a statement. They have been better against Jacksonville on the road, and they need a road performance.
Yeah, that's a good point. If they come out on Sunday and just completely blow out the Jaguars, that'll make a statement that that Cowboys game was just a one-time thing, which they ended up winning the game, but it wasn't their best game, obviously. So I think that would definitely make a statement that the Steelers are a legit would be 10-0 team if they beat the Jaguars. So, and then they'll have a huge game against the Ravens on Thanksgiving night. So the Steelers, they beat the Jaguars 3 straight times when they played in Jacksonville, but the Jaguars always play the Steelers tough. In those 3 wins, the Steelers won by only 17 combined points. So the Jaguars, I expect them to give them the Steelers everything they got, and hopefully the Steelers just come out out of the gates hot and don't come out lethargic and just get going from the start.
And that's why I'm going to say that the Steelers are going to make this their statement game on the road. I'm going to say 37-13 Steelers. And this is a far cry from the kid who was, because I was one of the people telling people, yo, Jacksonville's coming that season. Unfortunately, I was proved right, but right now, this isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars' time. Maybe in a few years, because they have a ton of promise, but it's 37-13 Steelers.
Yeah, Ty, it's amazing how much turnover Jaguars have had since that 2017 season when they beat the Steelers twice and shocked them, really, I thought, in that AFC divisional round game, beating them 45-42, and they got off to a 21-0 lead. Currently, they only have 4 starters on the team right now that played in that game back in 2017 in the divisional round game against the Steelers, and that's Brandon Linder, their center, right guard AJ Cam, and their left tackle Cam Robinson. And then on defense, the only one is Miles Jack as far as the starter.
It's amazing how fast things can change in the National Football League. And now it's time for us to pick our big performers for this game. And Chris, I'm interested to hear who you think will have this big game for the Steelers, because instead of being a must-win game for the Steelers, it's a gotta-win big game, I believe.
Yeah, as far as my breakout players on offense and defense, the Jaguars, they give up a ton of yards on in the run game as well. But we've seen the Steelers have had struggles running the ball the last 3 weeks, and I don't know. Do you think James Conner and the Steelers running game will get going this week? I don't know if I want to go there. I mean, they could fix it this week. I don't know. Their run blocking has been really suspect lately. But I think Fiedner needs to start calling some better plays more suitable to James Conner's talent.
Well, I'm going to go back to that well for me. I'm going to say that it's James Conner, but this time I'm going to say it's different because the team finally uses Derek Watt as a lead blocker out there. And I think that because there's been an emphasis in the press conferences from Tomlin, and that's the one thing that's really been missing. And I have faith that when Tomlin recognizes an issue and when the media kind of calls him out about it, he tends to get things done. So I think this is the game that James Conner finally gets back on track.
Yeah, Tomlin and the coaching staff, they fixed the third down issues they were having on defense. And, against the Bengals, Cincinnati was 0 for 13 on third downs. So, and also, then a couple weeks ago, they had a first drive touchdown against the Titans, which they haven't accomplished since week 15 of the 2018 season when they did that against the the Patriots. So definitely, I think Tomlin has a track record, especially this season, of fixing issues and getting whatever issues they've been having back on track. I'm not going to the well yet with the run game. I have to see it first to believe it, but I'm going to go with just the receivers across the board. I think they'll all, just like they did against the Bengals, they'll all chip in and make big plays.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if James Conner will get back in stride. And, of course, you can always count on the Steelers' receivers this year to pull off something big. So we don't know who's going to be the hero of the day. It might be Deontay Johnson. It might be James Washington. It might be Chase Claypool. It might be Juju Smith-Schuster. It might be Ray McLeod. That would be nice.
Yeah. And it could be another big day for Roethlisberger also. And I think what bodes well for them is that the Jaguars only have 9 sacks this season, which is the fewest in the league. And the Bengals only had 11. They still do. They're coming into the game against the Steelers completely shut them out in that department. So I think if they give Ben time, he's definitely going to find his receivers downfield.
Now it's time to go to the defense. And for me, I'm going to say Cameron Sutton gets his 4th consecutive forced fumble in as many weeks.
Yeah, and then for the defense for me, I'm going to go with T.J. Watt again because as John mentioned during the podcast, that Jawan Taylor's struggled at right tackle, and T.J. Watt has just been feasting on right tackles this year. Just having another defensive player of the year type of season where he's definitely a strong candidate for that award. He's probably he's definitely right up there with Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett for that. But also I think Minka gets an interception this week off Luton.
I think it's undeniable that T.J. Watt's going to win this award. Just too much impact that he has given to this team and to this defense. There's a lot of great players on this defense, but he's one of the top ones you think whenever this defense is just on this roll like they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think as far as the award, I think it's going to come down to those 3 players: Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, and T.J. Watt. I haven't looked at their overall stats as far as Aaron Donald's always a great player. Myles Garrett, leads the league in sacks. I think it's like 9.5, and T.J. Watt's tied, I think, with Aaron Donald with 9. So it might come down to the sack total, but I think they have to look at the overall. Who's been making the most impact and, splash plays.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game. Steelers versus Jaguars on CBS, 1 p.m. start. It should be fun. And that's all for us. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com and like us on Facebook. Our podcasts are available on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.